For 7 years, he hunted a demon queen. For 7 years, he sought vengeance for his family. But some truths are more monstrous than the monsters themselves. This is the story of Kalen and his journey to the shadow throne of Lilith.
The legendary demon hunter, Kalen, has dedicated his life to a single, burning purpose: to find and destroy the demon queen, Lilith. After years of relentless pursuit, he finally stands at the threshold of her cursed kingdom, a desolate land twisted into a grotesque parody of life. But as he descends into her domain, he discovers that the true horror is not the queen herself, but the chilling truth of her power. Lilith is not merely a ruler. She is a parasitic god who has absorbed entire worlds. And Kalen is not a hunter, but a final, precious piece she has been waiting to add to her collection. This is a story of psychological dread, cosmic horror where evil consumes everything, the ultimate, inescapable despair of a soul with no hope in sight. Kalen's knuckles were white as he gripped the hilt of his sword. Ignis Mortis, the cursed flame. The blade, forged from the teeth of a fallen god, was his final hope. Before him lay the remains of the kingdom of Eldoria, a land now known as the Maw of Lilith. The air didn't smell of decay, but of a cloying, sickly sweet perfume, a scent of corrupted life. Trees, once tall and proud, were now gnarled, bone-white effigies, their branches twisted into forms of screaming human faces. The ground under his feet was dark and pulsating. For 7 years, he had hunted Lilith, the demon queen who had consumed his world and shattered his soul. He had seen her work in nightmares, in the twisted faces of the villagers she had turned into thralls. But he had never seen her, not truly. He was here to change that. His journey through the corrupted city was a descent into a waking nightmare. The cobblestones of the royal road were not stone, but a fleshy, living substance that quivered with every step. From the ruined windows of what were once homes, hollowed-out figures stared out at him, their eyes replaced by red orbs. They did not attack, they simply watched, their silent torment a far more profound horror than any battle. Kalen recognized some of them: the blacksmith, the baker, even the children who had once played in his village. They were not dead, he realized, with a fresh wave of nausea. They were trapped, their consciousness intact, prisoners in their own decomposing bodies. A whisper slithered into his mind, not a voice he heard, but a thought he felt. "Welcome, little hunter. I've been waiting for you." He gritted his teeth and pushed forward, the sword in his hand growing warmer. The whisper was Lilith's touch, her mind reaching into his, playing with the fragile threads of his sanity. He saw his wife's face in the twisted branches of a dead tree, her eyes weeping a black, oily substance. "Kalen, why did you leave us?" A familiar voice pleaded, a sound that tore at his heart. He knew it was a lie, a trick. He had to. He pushed the visions away, a cold, hard resolve stealing his soul. He had not come here for forgiveness, but for vengeance. The path led him to the remnants of the royal palace. The stone walls had dissolved into a substance that looked like calcified meat. The ornate doors, once magnificent, were now a grotesque, sphinctered opening of sinew and bone. A low, rhythmic thump, thump, thump echoed from within, a sound that felt less like a heartbeat and more like a piston driving some monstrous machine. He passed through the fleshy entrance, and the air grew thick with the smell of sweet, rotting perfume. The antechamber was a cavernous space, its walls pulsing with a faint, iridescent light. From the ceiling hung what looked like giant, malformed grapes, but as he drew closer, he saw that they were the shrunken, preserved heads of knights, their hollow eyes fixed on the throne room door. So close. Lilith's whisper purred in his mind. "Your journey ends here, little hunter. Your prize awaits." Kalen's heart pounded, a desperate, frantic drumbeat against his ribs. The final door was before him, not of bone or flesh, but of solidified despair. It was a swirling, black vortex of screaming, disembodied faces, all reaching out for help. He saw his parents, his friends, everyone he had ever lost. It was the ultimate psychological attack, but he was prepared. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and shoved his hand through the wall of faces. They screamed a final, heart-wrenching chorus of torment as his hand passed through, and then he was inside. The throne room was not a room at all. It was the inside of a living thing. The walls were a pulsating, fleshy canvas of pink and red, crisscrossed with thick, black veins. The floor was a damp, spongy surface that squelched with every step. At the center of this grotesque chamber, the source of the relentless thumping sound was the throne. It wasn't a seat of power. It was a pulsating, organic chair constructed from the fused, still-breathing bodies of 1,000 people. Their limbs were woven together, their eyes glazed over, their mouths open in a silent, unending scream of agony. The very air was their breath, a suffocating mixture of their pain and Lilith's perfume. And on this throne of suffering, the Demon Queen waited. She was not what he had expected. He had imagined a beautiful, seductive creature, a queen of darkness and lust. Instead, Lilith was a formless, shimmering entity of pure malice. A constant flux of limbs, mouths, and eyes, her form twisted and contorted with a sickening grace. 1,000 whispered voices emanated from her, all in perfect, nightmarish sync. "Welcome to my sanctum, little hunter. Welcome home." Kalen felt his blood run cold. This wasn't a queen. This was a parasitic god, a being that had absorbed an entire civilization into its very core. The city, the people, the very essence of Eldoria, it was all her. Lilith reached out with a dozen shimmering tendrils, each one ending in a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth. They did not attack him, but merely coiled around his feet, playing with his boots. "You're a special one," she hissed, her voice a chorus of 1,000,000 tormented souls. So much hatred, so much despair, a powerful vintage. Then, the final, most horrible truth was revealed. From the very center of her throne, from the twisted, screaming mass of her victims, two faces emerged. His mother's face, her eyes pleading. His father's face, his mouth open in an eternal scream. And then, the faces of his wife and 2 young children, their forms woven into the heart of the throne. They had not died in the initial attack, as he had believed. They had been taken, and their suffering had been preserved for her amusement. "You see," Lilith chuckled, her form contorting with wicked delight. "They're not gone. They're a part of me, a part of us, just as you will be." Kalen stood paralyzed, the sword in his hand feeling impossibly heavy. His quest for vengeance, for peace, had been a fool's errand. He hadn't been a hunter. He had been a toy, a puppet whose strings she had been pulling for years. She hadn't wanted to kill him. She had wanted to break him, to watch his hope turn to despair before she consumed him. With a final, terrible roar of anguish, Kalen lifted his sword, not to strike her, but to choose his own fate. He drove the blade deep into his own heart, a final act of rebellion, a refusal to become another screaming face in her throne. As he fell, the light in his eyes fading, Lilith's chorus of voices filled the chamber with a sound that was both a triumphant roar and a mocking laugh. "Oh, my sweet hunter, you poor, foolish thing," she whispered, her tendrils wrapping around his dying body. "Death is just the beginning. Now, you are truly a part of me." His last conscious thought was the burning pain of his own soul being torn from his body and the horrific realization that he had not escaped. He had simply become the newest, most beautiful piece of her eternal throne, his consciousness trapped in a world of silent screams, forever staring into the endless, unblinking eyes of the Demon Queen.